Bernard Rudofsky was born April 19, 1905 and died March 12, 1988. He was a Moravian-born American writer, architect, curator, teacher, designer, engineer and social historian. He is best remembered for a series of MoMA exhibitions and a number of books that constitute a sustained argument for humane and sensible design. He believes that the lessons taught in the world of non-pedigreed architecture, that is, architecture of the indigenous and often anonymous, are especially useful to mankind in the context of the environmental struggles we now face.
Rudofsky was also noted for his sandal designs that aimed to allow for freedom of the foot. He thought that the modern shoe seemed to be designed for a foot that had a central big toe, as shown in the image on the right-hand side. He wanted to propose footwear that allowed the foot to behave as naturally as possible.
This idea of being connected with the natural and existing is explored through his exhibitions and texts concerning architecture of the vernacular. Rudofsky saw the value in this connection and felt that it should be a central focus for our approach towards design.
Vernacular is a term that is hard to define because it can be applied on so many levels and in architecture is often thought of as indigenous and almost uncivilized. However, the vernacular is often a simple and instinctual approach towards solving problems, addressing the direct needs of the user through manipulation of the surrounding environment.
The book Architecture Without Architects is an accompanying text to a travelling exhibition first shown in the Museum of Modern Art, New York. It was written as a reaction to the architecture and styles of the 60s and previous centuries, such as modernism and neoclassicism, which follow a specific set of rules and a fixed aesthetic. It is a brief and frank delivery of the manifesto that Rudofsky is trying to broadcast to the world. It aims to highlight and alter the perception towards our current and long-standing approach to design. It also highlights the role of historians throughout his history and their disregard for the abundance and richness of informal architecture.
We do not accept the sun should shine on our head in the highest heat of summer, or let the rain fall upon us on the winter when there is something that we can do about it to sustain our necessary comfort. Rudofsky explains the science behind the vernacular through the analogy of a suburban man falling asleep near his lawnmower, pulling a section of his Sunday newspaper over his head, thus reenacting the birth of architecture. Vernacular art design is more instinctive and impulsive than modern forms of architecture. It addresses direct needs and responds to, for example, to both climatic change and human need, manipulating immediate place and embracing resourcefulness.
This text deals with a number of central themes, including a reappraisal of the vernacular, and challenges the preconceptions of modern-day society. Rudofsky is critical of the way that historians have recounted informal architecture and establishes this theme in the beginning of the book in the form of a preface. This is then followed by black and white images from the exhibition that are accompanied by text. Graphically, this represents the style of the white gallery space.
As this text contains content that was originally for an exhibition, the images and messages may have less impact in the form of a book. However, the printing of the book has allowed for a larger distribution and further longevity than a travelling exhibition could. Rudofsky travelled around the world over many years to collect evidence for his exhibition. This was mostly photographic and from secondary sources.
Secondary interpretation by Rudofsky means that some of the points made in the book might lack the gravitas they could have achieved. Also, because the images are limited to black and white, the vibrancy and materiality is sometimes lost.
Rudofsky also makes some unsubstantiated comments. More sophisticated people are attracted by rugged country. In fact, they do not hesitate to seek out the most complicated configurations in the landscape. This unsubstantiated comment moves towards making this architectural approach more prestigious and aims to enthuse the reader to making steps towards the vernacular. This can be seen as a contradiction to his earlier statements regarding architecture without monument or prestige.
Due to the short nature of the text, there is a lack of depth. The second half of the book, originally the physical exhibition, is very encyclopedic, merely listing case studies without analysis or evaluation. The images and architecture are taken at face value and subcategorize buildings by physical features that might seem paradoxical.
Occasionally references and similarities between examples are used, but do not expand much further, if at all. This lack of depth can be seen when he talks about the images of grass structures. Indigenous building methods often show great daring and elegance. The soaring framework for the men's clubhouse in Maupau, in the Gulf of New Guinea, is made from bamboo poles and will be covered with thatch. Bamboo is not a tree, but a grass that may attain a height of 80 feet.
Very little technical understanding is gained about the way these systems and buildings actually work, and the evidence given seems to be fairly broad and superficial. If you're looking to this book for technical drawings or systems to copy, then you will be disappointed. This perhaps is because the book is written as a piece of propaganda, almost a manifesto for a cause. It is a stimulus for others to continue thought into the vernacular. As Rudofsky says, if I can open your eyes a little wider than their accustomed aperture, if I can make you observed without ethnic bias upon other people's dwellings, you will look at your environment with a more critical awareness.
Rudofsky's aim is to be subjective in the points he puts forward, and not to force ideas or propose a list of rules to be followed. It is for us to formulate an understanding of the vernacular and decide how we might apply it to our architectures. This is in keeping with Rudofsky's views of the vernacular itself, one whose definition is left open-ended and invites interpretation. Whilst at times this is confusing, it allows the exhibition's impact to be magnified by its simplicity. It acts as a springboard for Rudofsky's book, The Prodigious Builder, in which a more technical and cultural understanding of non-pedigree architecture is developed.
It is important to remember that Rudofsky's view of clothing as an anachronistic, irrational, impractical and harmful was the starting point of his freedom of lifestyle design ideals. He continued to contrast dominant Western solutions and often make them look outright ridiculous and arbitrary, proclaiming that the house has to become again what it was in the past, an instrument for living, instead of a machine for living. This would make all the difference in our conduct of life, like the difference between playing a violin and playing a jukebox.
Charles and Ray Eames were working at the same time as Rudofsky. Their vernacular method meant trying out as many design iterations as necessary before an idea could be decided. Their view was that the extent to which you have a design style is the extent to which you have not solved a design problem. In the book, Rudofsky discusses the ways in which architects design in the Western world, and suggests the ridiculousness in the public's tendency to place utter trust in the architect, since design should, like the vernacular, serve its purpose to perfection and be the result of devised sensibilities. A communal art produced by the spontaneous and continuing activity of a whole people with a common heritage.
Rudofsky declares that part of our troubles result from the tendency to ascribe to architects, to all specialists, exceptional insight into problems of living, when, in truth, most of them are concerned with problems of prestige. If vernacular design is about an evolution through necessity, then spontaneity and responsiveness cannot be met where concerns of prestige and finite rules are set. Much self-imposed limitations are absurd and reduce possibilities from the outset.
Rudofsky believes that in orthodox architectural history, emphasis is placed on the work of the individual architect, where the accent should be on communal enterprise. The men whose buildings' forms are indigenous to their origins and omit the artistic desire of style or fashion. The discriminative close-mindedness of architectural historian in Rudofsky's view suggests that architects such as Le Corbusier do not allow freedom or lifestyle because of their preoccupation, and as a result provide spaces and architectures that are mutable and disconcerting.
Corbusier professed in his book, Towards New Architecture, arrangement is one of the most fundamental prerogatives of architecture. His fixed ideals are seen here in his 5 rules of architecture and later in his book, The City of Tomorrow and Its Planning, where he devotes an entire chapter to order. He asserts the house, the street, the town are points to which human energy is directed, and thus, if they are not ordered, they oppose themselves to us.
Corbusier believes that nature thwarts us, posing a struggle to overcome. If we do not have rules, we will live in places that are not true to our desires for conformity, and thus forces ideas and rules upon the people who inhabit the spaces that he designs. Nature, viewed as a struggle to overcome, opposes Rudofsky's view of a vernacular environment as a product of its place, where the challenges of topography are embraced and the ideas of superiority are negated.
He states that architectural history as we know it is biased on the social plane. There is a division between architects and the everyday, a division between those who inhabit and those who design buildings. Rudofsky is concerned that we are not meeting the humane needs of the users of buildings because we have stopped thinking about how to solve a design problem. Many architects before us have developed solutions and rules, and we are at risk to applying them to situations where they are either out of place or antithetical. We have become too accepting and forgotten to ask why something should be done. Rather, we ask how something can be done. Rudofsky believes that in order to create architecture that is true to the needs of its users, we must find inspiration from a primitive time when the prodigious builders were doing just that.
Corbusier, on the other hand, believes that man is the sum of the universe which created him. As far as he himself is concerned, he proceeds according to its laws, formulating a coherent scheme, a rational body of knowledge on which he can act, adapt and produce. He views progression as man's march towards order and subsequently believes that this is continuity, puts man in harmony with the universe, and he is therefore right to behave as he does. He could not act otherwise.
What Rudofsky is proposing is a new way to approach design, reconciling technology with the art of living. In order to create an instrument for living, we must question and consider other people's dwellings to develop a more critical awareness of why we live the way we live. It's not about looking back and copying the universally admired Venetian facades, lifting them to alien environments where they are out of place with the societies that surround them, but rather forming a meaning as a result of sight, context, community, and demonstrates a good neighbouring rather than a catalogue of heterogeneous styles.
Rudofsky gives us a view of the old vernacular, yet we must remember the importance of progressing to a new vernacular, one that is closer to nature than the augmented world of Corbusier and that allows the same lifestyle that we have today. It's about designing in tune with our needs and our natural settings, oblivious of concern for style or monument, remembering that not all situations applied in the past may be applicable to the future. In order to design for communities, we should consider the vernacular design process of the past, where decisions were made through practice, observation and freedom, with consideration and stronger connection to our society today.
Rudofsky has opened up the term vernacular from the primitive hut to the thoughtfully designed Eames house, emphasising the vernacular as a design process as opposed to a design style. We must now perceive the vernacular as free from the narrow world of official and commercial architecture. This method can be seen in the architectural works of Attilio Bauer's office house, Chamberlain Powell and Bond's Barbican Centre, and Teranobu Fujimori's tea houses.